Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you like either of these watches, please reach out to me. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying these or any watches you see on Watchbox. That is T Mosso at thewatchbox.com. Today, I'm going to be shooting a comparative review of the new for 2023 Tudor Black Bay. Now, the watch you see off to the left is the previous in-house caliber model that's been made since 2016. To the right, we have the 2023 edition. There have been many changes, so this isn't versus, so to speak. This is more of a comparative review of the new watch. Let's start with the basics of the new watch, and then we will start the comparison in earnest. Okay, so the new watch for 2023 gets a lot of changes, but the basics stay the same. In stainless steel, the watch measures 41 millimeters in diameter. It's now 13.6 millimeters thick, 49.2 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and it has a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see that it's an imposing piece, a large watch, yes, heritage inspired, but considerably larger than any 1950s or early 60s Rolex or Tudor Submariner, and that is the lineage to which it pays its homage. That said, being a lot thinner now, it can easily slide under a cuff, almost all dress shirts and every jacket sleeve. It's a little bit narrower across the wrist. The big changes in thickness and in the lug spacing. Now, other changes too. Taking a quick look at the bracelet, we have that end length that's now 21 rather than 22 millimeters. We still have these skeuomorphic fake rivets, and then taking a quick look, you can see the removable links are fixed by screws. We've got a single fold deployant clasp. You can see the use of ceramic spring-loaded pin snaps there, so over time the clamshell cannot wear down the ceramics, so the tolerances will stay snappy. We have the T-fit system, which gives you the ability to make 1 millimeter changes up to 8 millimeters total, so you have a lot of incremental sizing flexibility inside of the clasp without needing to resort to a strap tool. So this is new on the Black Bay for 2023. Other important things to mention, we still have a wonderfully tactile bezel feel, and I will show you so there is no confusion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go, 60 click bezel, but I do think the action's a little bit more refined this year. We have a different knurling too, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. We'll do a quick Lume shot of the watch so you get a sense of how it looks in the dark. That is the new watch. This is the old watch. If there are any disparities in luminescence, you're going to see it here. Very, very few changes, although one big one that you could see is that the seconds hand of the new watch has a differently shaped luminescent application. The old watch is a little diamond, Tudor snowflake style. The new one is round. All right, we're going to go back to the light now, take a look at the watch, talk a bit about the tech. We have a new version of the MT5602 movement. This is the MT5602U, and no, nothing has changed on the case back. We still have a solid case back. The new movement is now a master chronometer. Let's go over the basic tech specs. So still automatic winding. It features a 70-hour power reserve, hacking seconds, a 4 Hz beat rate. It has 25 joules. It does feature stop seconds. For shock resistance, it has a full balance bridge, a free sprung balance, and the winding rotor pivots on ball bearings rather than a jeweled staff. It still meets all of the COSC chronometer standards, but it goes beyond because it is now a master chronometer. That's right, the Matas standard was not just some Omega proprietary thing drummed up for marketing purposes. It is an open standard, and any watch that meets that standard can call itself a master chronometer. What does it entail? Well, for practical purposes, it's a much more comprehensive test of the watch. First, the movement has to meet COSC. Second, the movement gets tested in 6 positions rather than 5, and it's a fully cased up watch test rather than the COSC's bare movement test. The delta, that is the amount that the watch is allowed to vary within a 24-hour period, is much more exacting than COSC. If you think about COSC, a movement can actually vary by quite a few seconds into double digits with +6, -4, whereas here, you have a 5-second variation within a 24-hour period, which is quite exacting. And Tudor's in-house standard is -2 + 4. So effectively what you're probably going to get is something along the lines of -0 + 5. And then Tudor is going to refine past that to make sure that it's -2 + 4 or better before you get it. The master chronometer standard also includes a lot of other things too, like winding efficiency, power reserve, shock resistance, water resistance, and resilience against over 15,000 Gauss of anti-magnetic qualities. And it does have that 15,000 plus resilience that you'll find on Omegas, so it's now equal in that regard. So let's talk about some of the changes. Well, changes start on the movement that you can see. Some of the bridges and the rotor now open worked. Not a big change, but different. Also, a sunray motif, deeply graved channels radiating out from the center can be seen on the bridges of the movement. So that's where things do change. Now, taking a quick look at how the watches vary relative to each other, I'm going to shout out one of the most obvious changes, which is the fact that they are different sizes in a very subtle way. First, let's take a look at the thickness. When you put the older watch up against the newer watch, you could see that the timepiece is thicker for 2022 and thinner for 2023. How big a difference? Well, the new watch off to the right is 13.6 millimeters thick. The older watch is 14.9 millimeters thick. The older watch is 49.9 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, whereas the newer watch on the right is 49.2. And if you take a look at the end links of the bracelet, you can see that there is some difference here. The older watch features a broader lug spacing. The older watch is 22, the newer watch is 21. So those are real measurable differences. There are fractional differences in the width of the bezel itself, but quite a noticeable difference in the size of the dial and the size of the crystal. So on the older watch, the crystal has a span, as I measure it, and this is not the easiest thing to measure, but 33.3 millimeters, and the dial is similarly large. Here you can actually see that the crystal is smaller and the dial within is also smaller. So here the crystal is only 31.7 millimeters across, so there are some changes here. You can see that both the luminescent plot of the seconds hand and the counterweight in these two instances have been changed. There's less text on the new watch, which is a master chronometer, so you can see that there's 2 lines here rather than 3 lines at the base. Now, they say there are different shades to the anodized red aluminum bezel inserts. Difficult for me to see here with my eyes. It's more evident through the viewfinder than it is in person. And I'll tell you what I think I'm seeing. What I think I'm seeing is that the old bezel is a little darker and the new one is a little bit brighter. The other change that's obvious is you can see the font used for the 1 is definitely different across the 2 bezels. And I suspect that all of the elements of the font have been varied slightly. Taking a quick look at the case, you can see that the bevels on the newer watch are broader, whereas the bevels on the older watch are considerably narrower. There are some changes there. What you can also see is that the knurling of the new bezel is different from the old bezel. You can see the old bezel has a very narrow vertical coining, whereas the new bezel has a broader knurling, and the little indentations are broader in their center and irregular from top to bottom in their shape. So you can see there are some changes there. In terms of the crown, lots of changes. Outboard, you can see that the actual Tudor Rose, which is the 1968 and earlier logo, here it's a little bit different. You can also see that the crowns are very different in shape and size. You can see that the older crown is taller, whereas the newer crown, there we go, they're lined up. The newer crown is wider. You can see the old stem tube was broad and colored to match the bezel, whereas the new one is hardly visible. Now, the dials themselves have also changed. Not just the lines of text, but if you look at the old watch, you can see that it has a matte, muted look to it. Whereas the new one's still muted and understated, but If you take a close look, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this or I'm going to be able to capture it, but there is a very fine sunburst brushing out from the center that is not present on the older watch. Taking a quick look at the sapphire, we'll see if there's any visible difference in the way that they are domed. Perhaps, but difficult to distinguish and even more difficult to describe. There's also said to be a difference in the shading of the plating on the hands and the color of the dial print. You've got better eyes than mine if you can identify that. They look pretty similar to me. Okay, taking a quick look at the bracelet of the older watch too, you can see how this used to be done. This is the clasp mechanism, and this is the clasp internal. A couple of divots drilled, and you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point. You can even see externally the clasps are very different in shape. The newer one is narrower and also features the T-fit system, so you have a proper dive extension now on the newer version of the Black Bay. We'll take a quick look at the case back just to verify that nothing material has changed on the case back. Other things that bear mentioning: there is a new 5-link bracelet available on the Black Bay for 2023, very similar to something along the lines of a Rolex Jubilee. So although these both have oyster-style bracelets, there is a new bracelet option available on this watch that changes the look, and if anything makes it just a little bit more dressy, and that's definitely something to take into consideration. If you can see the bezel color and the hand color differences, once again, you are a better man than I am. Also important to mention, one more thing about the Maytaz test that's kind of material, is that it's tested for chronometry at both 100% and 33% of mainspring wind, which is a much more taxing test and a much higher standard that acknowledges the watch will not always be fully wound at the time it's in use or necessarily on your desk at night. So that's also something to take into consideration. Both of the watches remain 200 meters water resistant. These are both meters first dials, both chapter rings. The differences are subtle, but the new watch altogether is a better piece. If you don't quite want to step down to the size of the Black Bay 58 or a Pelagos 39, this is a great way to get into the traditional 41mm Black Bay with a better fit altogether without losing so many of the features and the wrist presence that defined the earlier version of the watch. Let me know in the description below, which of these do you like better? Do you like the changes? And reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com, for purchase and pricing details.